Buckeye Breakdown podcast back live on Friday morning, getting ready for the third to last regular season game, the Buckeyes and the Boilermakers. This is a game that has a lot of people's attention. I know a lot of people are excited, and frankly, some people are still having a little bit of PTSD from the last time these two teams saw each other in 2018. How much does this game resemble the last time these two teams met? Or how much is that game simply just part of the past with a few guys left hanging on both rosters with two teams now that are trying to put together something special at the end of the year? Purdue still has a chance to make it to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship. Of course, they've got a couple of great playmakers on both sides of the ball. We're going to break it all down for you. It's Buckeye Breakdown preview and prediction. The Buckeyes and Purdue coming up Saturday afternoon right here, Buckeye Breakdown. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Breakdown as we get ready for this week's game. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with our coach, Tommy Zagorski. Coach, I know we're both fighting colds this morning, but that's okay. It's the fall. It's Friday morning. It's a big game week. I know we're both excited for what should be a good game, and I got to be honest, I was a little bit surprised when I first saw the line that came out was a 3-touchdown spread. It feels a little rich to me because of what Purdue's done to Iowa and Michigan State. I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with that number.
Hey, Brendan, we talk about this every week. The wise guys have the sharpest pencils in America. These guys make a lot of money making money off of people who think they're making money off of them, which really, grammatically, that sentence doesn't really resonate anywhere on anybody's ears. But I think what you watch is you watch a Purdue team who has played spoiler. They've played spoiler twice this year against an Iowa team that's a really talented team and also did the same thing against Michigan State last week. The biggest difference you're going to see right out of the gate is Michigan State up front. And I know last week we talked about the kind of, I don't want to say bad performance, the underwhelming performance of the Buckeyes up front in Lincoln on Saturday. Michigan State's offensive line is average as day. And we're really going to talk about that probably more next week. But the reason I say that is there's probably a little bit more hope in this Purdue defense because they were able to get to the quarterback. They were able to, help, kind of negate Michigan State's normal attack that they have with Kenneth Walker III. And they did it with a defense that plays really, really hard. They're on their second scheme. In 2020, Brian Braun brings in Bob Diaco. Bob Diaco's been everywhere in America as a coach. He's another guy. He was the head coach at UConn. He was at Notre Dame. Bob Diaco's been a lot of places. If you move a lot of places, and it's not really on your own accord, there's a reason you're moving a lot. And that's not a knock on Bob Diaco. I've had the pleasure of meeting him. He seems like a great guy when I've talked to him. But what Brian Braun did was he went and got
Jeff Braun.
Sorry, Jeff. I'm thinking of his brother Brian, who also I know. But Jeff decided to get not one, not two, but 3 defensive coordinators this offseason. I've never seen that before anywhere on the planet. Their cornerbacks coach has to feel left out. He's the only guy that's not a coordinator on the defensive side of the football. It's kind of like what happened. Like you're sitting there. I guess he sits in the corner and just kind of waits to see what's going to happen. Like, yeah, we'll cover these guys, man. You want inside leverage or outside leverage? All right, got it. And what he did was he brought in a lot of experienced guys. He brought in Hagan, who's been at Texas. Hagan was at Indiana before that, his alma mater. He coached at Purdue in the early 2000s. I mean, he's got almost 30 years of experience. You bring in Ron English. Ron English has been everywhere. Ron English was the head coach of Eastern Michigan. I think he was the head coach of my Little League baseball team. I mean, the guy's coached everywhere in America. So you have Ron English. And then, Brad Lambert comes in, who was the head coach at Charlotte. And really, as you bring in these head coach type guys, it changes your defense quickly. And when they did that, it really gave, Jeff, Braun, the ability to stand on the offensive side of the football because that's who he is. He's an offensive football coach. The reason Purdue brought him to West Lafayette from Western Kentucky was he took over an abysmal offense, an abysmal program really at that point at Western Kentucky, and built this thing into a top 25 program in Little Bowling Green, Kentucky. And then brings half the team with them to Purdue And they really have, they really jump out of the gates early, had a really great first year, and the aforementioned headache and nightmare that was in 2018, and really having the ability to watch this team kind of grow. And they've gotten a little stagnant, and a lot of it was because of their defensive football. But right now they're playing really good defensive football. And really the guy that they're going to rally behind all week is going to be George Karlaftis. Karlaftis is the best player on their defense. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when watching him on film, I think the Buckeyes are going to attack him early. And the reason I say that, Brendan, is he's a good player. He's got an incredible motor. He cares greatly. I just don't see him being this elite defensive end player that maybe we're putting on a pedestal all week. And now Ryan Day and Greg Studra and like those guys all week, they're going to talk about how this guy's elite and how he's great. I don't know if he starts at Ohio State right now. I can't say he's better than 9 or 11 for us. I can't say that he's better than, athletically speaking, than Jack Sawyer, who's got to play him all week. And this is where great programs like Ryan Day's Ohio State Buckeyes have the ability and the depth to go have guys that are 5-star athletes coming out of high school, 4-star athletes that have incredible upside that get to masquerade as whoever that is, that defensive player that they're going to have. And what's going to happen is, in my opinion, and I want to jump ahead, Ohio State's going to jump out early. I think they're going to keep their foot on the gas, and they're going to be sick of hearing, "Oh, we only beat Nebraska by this much." I'm probably going to go on the other end of where the wise guys are on this game. I really think Ohio State's got a great matchup this week. Just that's your little foreshadowing, right? We'll come back to that.
Good tease.
Yes, the tease, if you will, to stick around with us today as we discuss this game. But the one thing I think that I was getting into with Ryan Day is the ability on Sunday to come in, and they're going to celebrate Jack Sawyer. They're going to celebrate Jack Sawyer because they're going to say, "Man, you did a great job preparing our offensive line. We were able to get off the football." And really, that's the thing about this defensive line for Purdue. They've been beat up a little bit. Guys rotated in or out. I mean, Karlaftis has been the one guy that's been the constant for them, from that defensive standpoint. And it's going to be an interesting way that Ohio State attacks him. I think, personally, you're going to see more gap scheme runs this week than we saw in weeks prior, getting back into the counter game, getting back into that duo play where we talked about having the extra tight end in. And really now what that does, it gives you the ability to cultivate as many double teams as you want. That means you're going to get a double team on Karlaftis, because sometimes in the zone game, that's where you lose him. You're going to lose those combos when you get into that wide zone that the Buckeyes run. And now they're going to be running with this guy who's got a good motor. He's going to run with, the different players that Ohio State has up front. And that's where it kind of gives him an ability to get more in a one-on-one matchup and go make a play. And what we really need the Buckeyes to do is we need Travion Henderson to just get past that first line of defense, because the linebacker core for Purdue, this is the worst linebacker group we have seen probably since maybe Maryland. I mean, I would really to look back at it. I just don't think they have the guys that you normally would see in a linebacker crew in the Big Ten. I mean, they're not Penn State. They're definitely not Nebraska. JoJo, whatever that kid's name was last week.
Yeah, JoJo Doman.
Yeah, JoJo Doman played. I mean, JoJo Doman. JoJo Doman. I was like, if I'm a Nebraska fan, that's the jersey I'm buying, because JoJo Doman was all over the field.
Tough news for him yesterday. His season and his Husker career is over. He needs surgery on his left hand, so he's done for the year.
Oh,
it's certainly tough because he's fun to watch for sure.
Well, he'll end up in camp somewhere. If JoJo Doman doesn't end up in camp somewhere, I mean, just having that last game, to go out on that call and to be done as a Husker. I didn't even see that, Brendan. You're always on top of it. You got it, brother. So that's awesome. But they're going to expect Kieran Douglas for them to be the other guy that's going to be able to do that. To make a lot of plays and run around, and they fund a lot of stuff to their nickel. But realistically, this linebacker core that they have at Purdue is very average. And I think Ohio State can get on the second level. I think Travion Henderson will be able to run the football, and that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what the Buckeye air attack can do.
Well, we got a lot to dive into, and I think maybe the Karlaftis thing is probably the appropriate place to start, because it's his name and David Bell's name that you've probably heard ad nauseum as a fan this week preparing for this game. Again, you're thinking about payback. You're thinking about what happened in the final year of the Urban Meyer era. But the reality is, I just don't think this Purdue team, even though they've had a couple of big wins, I don't see them this year as being the same kind of team that can pull off a stunner. I David Bell is very, very good. Very good. I don't think he's Rondale Moore. I think Purdue's offense is extremely one-dimensional. They're averaging 77 rushing yards per game. I mean, I realize the Buckeyes have been good against the run, but if you know that a team can't run the football and they don't really respect your ability to run it, it's a lot easier to sit there and say, okay, we're gonna force you to run to beat us because we're gonna just take David Bell out of the game. And I don't know if they have the depth at wide receiver to do that. Now, look, David Bell's probably still going to get his touches because he's that good. He's extremely athletic. I love the way he uses his hands and running routes. I just, to me, it would take something cataclysmic for the Buckeyes to, just totally lose track of where he is and let David Bell beat them all day. I mean, he is the top of the scouting report. And there's a significant gap between him and the rest of the group, the way I see it. Aiden O'Connell's been good. I think he's been good in some moments where Purdue really needs him to shine. Look, man. I realize they beat Iowa. I realize they beat Michigan State. To your point, I don't think Michigan State's offensive line is terrific. And because Purdue's defensive line is good, they control the line of scrimmage. And, any team's capable of winning on any given day. But again, I think the Buckeyes right now, just from a talent perspective, there's a pretty big gap between where they are and where the rest of the league is. And so I think it's a lot easier to see an upset if it's another team than it is for the Buckeyes. So David Bell on the offense, George Karlaftis on the defensive side. You started to allude to it with Jack Sawyer being the guy to kind of replicate him in practice all week. Let's give Karlaftis his due because he is their star defensive player. What does he do so well that attracts all this attention?
It's his relentless motor and his outstanding hands. And this is what we talked about with the Ohio State Buckeye defensive line at the beginning of the year, that guys weren't using their hands well enough. And this is where you watch Karlaftis. He plays with his hands really well. He's gone back and forth from being a rooted 4-eye in that 3-4 defense. They asked him to stand up a little bit last year in their 3-4. This year, he's back into like a 4-3. He's built more like a hybrid guy for the NFL. But what you see is he doesn't have the same, in my opinion, hip looseness to be able to drop back into coverage and do the things that like Jack Sawyer can do at this point in his career. But Karlaftis is going to have the ability to be able to, when he gets in one-on-one situations, he is tough to block because he has this incredible motor. And this motor continues to go because he doesn't have that elite next level. He's more of a pressure guy than a sack guy. And what that means is he can't get home. He's gonna speed up a quarterback's decision and process making, but he hasn't really gotten home as much. Right now off the top of my head, I should have done better. I think he's got 3 sacks on the season. Does that sound right, Brendan?
I'll double check, but I think
I think he's got 3 sacks. He's got some TFL. He's got about 7 TFLs, I think. But what you see with Karlaftis is he's a guy that is gonna play with that really, really good motor. He's a poor man's Aiden Hutchinson. And it's a probably not the best analogy to give him. But I think where the difference is that Aiden's this long, big, physical, gifted player, where Karlaftis is a good player. He maximizes God-given talent set every week, playing in a conference where tackles are hard to come by at every level. And realistically, we've seen it every week when we've watched this Big Ten play. There has not been dominant offensive tackle play by opposing teams in the Big Ten. I mean, realistically, the best tackles we have seen to date in the Big Ten are the guys wearing scarlet and gray. And because of that, it allows these defensive linemen to go make plays against probably perceived not as good of football players. And it's hard. That's the biggest. There's only every year, and this is going to come back to recruiting, and this is not to take away from George Karlaftis, but this is that situation where there's only so many people that God creates on this earth that are 6'6" that can bend a certain way, that can do this. And there are guys that are that big, but they're missing that trait, or on the other end of the spectrum. Because of that, there's going to be that issue where you look at an offensive tackle at a certain school and go like, all right, Karlaftis can go win on that as he goes forward with it. When Karlaftis plays really well is when his other defensive linemen start making plays. where offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches, when they prepare for Purdue, go, wait a second, we can't double and triple team this guy as much as we'd like to. This is why I see Ryan Day and their staff running a little bit more gap scheme runs. Now, we could sit here Saturday afternoon, we could sit here Sunday morning and come back to it, and I'll eat crow if they don't. But I know if I was game planning, I'd want to run as many gap scheme runs as I can because it's going to give me double teams. It's going to give gap exchange movement. The counter game's another way to kind of get at him a little bit early, get some of those guards going, let those guys lower their pads, let Thayer Munford go be captain zero or block zero, go let Paris Johnson kind of atone for, really last week. And we went hard on Paris, but Paris played really, really well the week before. And when Paris's feet are running and he gets going, he plays really well. And I don't want to say this, like, it sounds kind of ill-advised, but he plays better at home. Like, Paris Johnson is a better player at home. He must just love the hotel that the Buckeyes stay in the night before the game. I don't know. It just makes him feel better as he gets to it. And he gets the opportunity to go run his feet. And I think he's going to have a better game this week. I think it's going to be, like you and I talked later last week or this past week, 3 of the 5 offensive linemen got into the champion circle. He was one of the guys that didn't. When that happens, you get bummed out about that, especially a guy that has that much care, that has that much want, that has that much drive, like a Paris Johnson. His entire life he's been told he's the greatest gift to offensive line play. You're the next Orlando Pace. And then he gets to Ohio State and he's not in that circle. That's tough to swallow. He's going to play really hard this week. He's going to have a good week. I guarantee you he's probably getting extra work with Stud. He's probably getting extra work with Stud's GA Cody Kennedy, who does a phenomenal job with that offensive line. He's a local Division III guy who played at Coleraine and kind of worked his way up. He's working his way up the coaching ladder right now. That's what he's doing. He's getting extra time with those guys and probably maybe even leaning into Kevin Wilson a little bit and trying to get him to help him out a little bit to kind of get him, restarted and rejuvenated, because this is what this Buckeye offensive line needs to do. They need to dominate Karlaftis early. And when they do that, they're going to get up on these linebackers. And Trayvon Henderson is going to return to that player that we've seen. I mean, he's still averaging 7+ yards a game, 7 yards a carry, which is, video game like, but it gets him down in the top 4, I think, in the country now, instead of being the number 1 or number 2 guy in the country. And the Ohio State's going to take a lot of pride in that. Being number 4 in the country for them, that's not something they rest their hat on. They want to get up to 1 and 2 in every category, not just the football college rankings. It's going to be with running the football and going from there. If they can get Karlaftis off schedule by running the ball early at him, now they're also the play action stuff that Ohio State does with the cross flow action with the tight end, pulling the guard with a little bit of the waggle stuff that they do as well. That's been really good. The notorious shot plays that Ryan Day's hit over the years. Those are going to be ways that they attack this Purdue secondary as well on Saturday. And when they are able to do that, they're going to have the ability to stretch the field with a healthy Garrett Wilson, hopefully a healthy Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jagba, and really get back to that 3-headed monster that people just have nightmares about getting ready for. And that's where you see the Buckeye offense, I hope, rejuvenate and get the ability to come back to kind of where they were prior to that Nebraska game.
You started to hit on something I wanted to bring up, so maybe we don't have to totally circle into this, but the offensive line in particular, DeJuan Jones and Nick Petit-Frere told us on Wednesday, that they felt a little bit humbled after the last couple of weeks, but also that, essentially they really weren't far off from ripping off some big runs. It's just a matter of finishing blocks that they had started, getting to the second level of the defense. I don't know if it's just them trying to pump themselves back up mentally. But it really felt like when you watch the film that there were a lot of plays that went for 3 yards or 4 yards that could have very easily gone for 25, but didn't because of one block, and then the whole thing fell apart. And I get the impression that the attention to detail this week is going to be at an extremely high level. And because Purdue's linebacking core is not as good as what Ohio State has seen in recent weeks here, I would be surprised if TreVeyon Henderson doesn't have a great day here this week. But I want to turn the conversation to CJ Stroud because, CJ for, God, I don't know. 5 weeks in a row or whatever it was. He was unbelievable, right? Didn't throw an interception, 15 touchdowns, 1,000+ yards in like a 4-game stretch, or I should say in a 3-game stretch. And I think he was at like 1,500 after the 5 games. It's pretty clear that he is one of several guys in a wide open Heisman race. CJ's not talking about that, and I don't blame him. But he is playing at the level that is required to win that kind of an award. And frankly, a lot of that stuff is cemented based on what you do at the end of the season. And right now, across college football, there is no clear front runner to win the Heisman Trophy this year. It's probably as open as it's ever been, which makes it a lot of fun. I don't know if CJ is going to win the Heisman or not this year, but let's focus on this weekend. Where can he be better against Purdue that he wasn't quite as sharp against a good Penn State and a good Nebraska defense?
Brandon, we talk about this every week, and I feel like a broken record. And I know Ryan Day would want to crush me for this. Take off. When you get to the line of scrimmage and there's 7-8 yards in front of you, you don't have to sit there and extend the play and go throw the football. Take off and slide. Like right now, Ohio State's got more equipment than anybody in the country. Grab a big pad, the same way everyone learned how to slide when they were playing baseball growing up. This is the same way we teach quarterbacks how to do this. You grab one of those like gymnastics pads, you put it down, you put a sheet on it, and teach the guy to go slide. Like teach him to do that, because here's the thing. Now it's going to force, when he does that a couple times, what's it also going to force secondary guys to do? Most teams are running zone against the Buckeyes because they can't cover us man. So when you're running zone, where do your eyes go as a defensive player? To the quarterback. So the eyes are going to the quarterback as they're watching that quarterback in the zone. Like they're watching him and they know he runs up to the line of scrimmage and they go, well, I've watched film. He's not going to take off. This guy's not going to run the football. Now they can just sit there in coverage and wait. And he pats the ball and pats the ball and pats the ball. And that's when he gets into trouble trying to throw balls into windows that he doesn't need to throw them into right now. We're going to bury him right now. He's only thrown 5 picks on the year. I mean, to think about that, 20% of his interceptions on the season were last week. 40%. Sorry, my math was off this morning.
Yeah.
But you look at that, to think about that, those 2 ill-advised throws, besides that, he's done a good job of not throwing the football into windows that he doesn't need to throw them into. He's got this great receiver core. I think for CJ to take off a couple times, it's going to soften up that zone coverage. It's going to give him the ability to come back to rolling out of the pocket and extend plays there. The other thing is, and it's not on him as much, it's on the aforementioned offensive line that you alluded to in our last part of the segment. It's important that that offensive line gives him time to just set his feet. Because when CJ Stroud sets his feet, steps into throws, there aren't many people better than him in the country. And that's where you're going to see him kind of grow. But it comes back to rip off a 5-yard run, rip off a 6-yard run, rip off a 7-yard run. And I'm not saying they've got to come out and have a designed quarterback run game where they're running Q power and, doing different things where they're, they did a little bit of speed option last week. And I think, like I said, on Sunday, I think that was more of Ryan Day being like, oh yeah, you guys run option too. Guess what? We can do that as well. Like whatever you do really well, like we're going to add an element of it into our offensive game plan just to kind of show you that we're better than you. And excuse me, there goes that cough. But what I think is going to really happen going forward is CJ Stroud is going to have an awesome game on Saturday. He's got the full strength of the receivers back. People also forget he's got the safety net of Travion Henderson or Jeremy Ruckert when he's going to go throw the football. Even Cade Stover's another guy when he gets through his progression, and get him back to setting his feet, going through that 4th or 5th band in his progression. A lot of that mesh and air raid stuff that Ryan Day likes to run, to really get those rub routes going early and then have those offshoots that he's going to throw either the wheel or throw the OTB, over the box or the deep over the box, depending on what way they articulate it in the Woody. It's important that he gets back to doing those things and let him just kind of have those easy pitch and catch early. I'm not saying it's like at the beginning of the season we were like, well, he's got to throw a hitch here. He's got to throw this. And let your players play. Like we talked about it, Brendan, on Sunday. A hitch with this receiver core can go 75 yards. We saw it happen. It can happen again. You don't always have to hit the bomb ball, but when you do have the ability to go hit the bomb, it's pretty cool. When you have murderers row at 3, 4, and 5 in your lineup, and they get up to the plate and 3, 4, and 5 strike out, and you don't hit a home run, you get pretty bummed out. You play. Brendan, you and I grew up with the Cleveland Indians as fans, and like when you saw Baerga and Bell and Murray and Tomey and Ramirez and all, you went to that lineup and they didn't hit a home run. You were kind of like, as a kid, like, really? They didn't hit a home run? Like, it's the same thing with Ohio State's receiver core. They're so talented. and you get frustrated because you're like, wait a second, let's try to get it up there to Olave, let him go make a play. Let's try to get to Garrett Wilson on a deep comeback. Let's try to get to Jack Smith-Njigba on the through route, whatever it may be. And I think that's where C.J. Stroud's going to really grow and continue to develop for the Buckeyes.
I'm excited to watch Stroud this weekend because I think he's got every reason to go out and put together a really, really good performance. Maybe some of it's just hindsight, but I feel like after the really hot stretch offensively that they had for, a month plus, there was all this attention on the Penn State game because, okay, now you're finally going to see, a notch up in competition. And a lot of people last week, I thought, gave Nebraska due credit for being a good football team. Nobody wanted to say, hey, they haven't, they haven't lost a game by more than 8 points. They didn't want to hang their hat on that because it's like a crutch, right? As a Buckeye fan, you're like, well, right. If they keep losing close games, I don't know, is that good for us or not? And the Buckeyes go out and it was far from a convincing win, but they played well enough to win the game. And there was very little time where the game felt like it was up for grabs. So, I think with those two games and I don't want to call it humble pie, right? The offensive line had acknowledged the fact they felt like they were humbled a little bit. I feel like there's some element of the whole team probably got a dose of that. It's not easy to just go out and steamroll somebody. And I don't know if they expect that every week they're going to throw up 600 yards of offense and 45 points and go home. But their attention is certainly on Purdue. The Boilermakers are not going to sneak up on anybody after what they've done to Iowa and Michigan State. I just think you're going to see a really focused Ohio State team this week that's going to execute at a high level. I'd be surprised if it's otherwise.
I would agree with you 1,000%. I think Ryan Day does a great job of getting these guys up for games, especially at home, 3:30 game. They're going to learn the history lesson of 2018. Rondale Moore's not jumping on the bus on the ride over from West Lafayette, and it's going to be an opportunity for the Buckeyes to really solidify themselves as this elite team that we thought they were becoming or maturing into at that point. And it's I alluded to when you get a puppy, you start teaching it how to you house train it, and when you're house training that puppy, all of a sudden the puppy goes outside a little bit more, and you're like, man, we got it. This puppy's got it. And then one day you come home and you see the puppy standing there, and all of a sudden there's a puddle there for you, and you go, wait a second, I thought we were house trained, and it's not the end of the world because it doesn't destroy anything. You still love the puppy, and we still love the Buckeyes. They're still growing, they're still developing, and I think that this team is not a national championship caliber team yet. I think, but we do see the framework of it going forward.
I'm glad you brought that up because the college football playoff rankings came out on Tuesday, as they have, as they have now for 2 weeks and will continue to for the next few. I don't think it was any great surprise to see the Buckeyes move up to number 4, considering that Michigan State lost. It sends a clear message right now that Ohio State is in command. I continue to believe that if Ohio State wins out the remainder of its games, and if undefeated Cincinnati wins out the remainder of its games, that the committee's not putting Cincinnati in ahead of Ohio State. Obviously, a lot of controversy around Michigan and Michigan State this week. The message to me was really interesting from the committee because it feels as though this year they're letting you know that it's as subjective as it's ever been. I was stunned, frankly, that Michigan State fell behind Michigan. I don't care how long that conversation takes. I don't care if Michigan looks like the better team. They literally lost 2 weeks ago. The whole point of this thing is to play games on the field and not have an arbitrary method deciding who's good and who's not, who wins and who loses, who gets to play for a national title and who doesn't. Michigan State 9 days ago. No, I guess it was 9 days ago when it was announced. It's 13 days ago now as we shoot this on Friday. Michigan State beat Michigan. They're both one-loss teams. They've both played a very similar schedule. They've got a very similar resume. I realize that Michigan State lost to Purdue last week. Purdue's the number 19 ranked team in the country. So you're gonna hammer Michigan State for that? I'm not saying that head-to-head is the be-all, end-all, but when it's close, I don't understand how Michigan State falls behind Michigan. The reason I bring this all up, and you can tell me what you think along the way here, I actually think that helps the Buckeyes, because if Ohio State beats Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, and whoever they play in a Big Ten title game, those are 4 ranked opponents. Oregon is not going to have the same caliber of team on their schedule the rest of the way. And if there becomes a debate between the two, that line of thinking, to me, screams Ohio State's getting in the playoff and Oregon wouldn't if the debate is there. I think Oregon should be more worried about Cincinnati or Oklahoma than they should be the Buckeyes, even if they've beaten Ohio State. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that line of thinking from the committee, but I think it's got a chance to benefit Ohio State potentially.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the committee's human elements, and they're going to watch games. And majority of us, it was the most watched game in college football, I believe, this year was that Michigan State-Michigan game.
Yep.
When majority of America watched that game, what did they see? They saw a team. They saw a Michigan State team beat a Michigan team that probably a lot of people didn't think was going to happen. If you remember, at one point, Michigan has that defensive touchdown before the half that gets called back. Like, that game was like this close to being like a blowout in Michigan's favor. I think that the committee thinks Michigan's a better overall talented football team, not to take away from Michigan State beating them head to head. But I agree with you 1,000%, Brendan. If you beat somebody head to head, why play the game? Like, why even have college football then? Have a computer-generated system where you look at these people, run the numbers. We've got the algorithms to do it. Like, run the numbers and just say, okay, the national champion is the boys in Athens. Like, I still don't even know if Georgia plays Alabama today, that Georgia would be that big of a favorite. I know that sounds crazy to think. I know Alabama's struggling with LSU, but at the end of the day, it's Alabama. You're still looking across that sideline at Nick Saban with a fistful of rings, like ready to go. It's different. And really, the college football playoff is flawed. We've all talked about it being flawed. It's flawed in the sense that it's human element. What's the most flawed thing in the world? Humans, us. We make mistakes all the time. Like, we are the ones that make the mistakes. So you have the human element into it. Then you take into account the fact they do on primetime TV on a Tuesday night, they release these. So they have these things for 3 people. They have them for you and I, so we can talk about it. They have it for the fan base, so the fan base has something else to talk about on a Tuesday as an in-between. It's genius by college football.
Sure.
All right, last game in Saturday. Sunday, you do the recap. Monday, what are you going to talk about? It's follow us on Buckeyes Now, like how we go through the week. We talk about recruiting. We lead you up to the game. There has to be some content that college football wants out there. So what they do, their marketing people put this thing together, and part of it is they're sitting there and they go, you know what? Let's get people talking about this college football playoff. I got it. Let's put Michigan ahead of Michigan State, even though it went this way. And I think it's a tough one. And really, that's where you see that, and it's for people to talk about it. I mean, college football, I've been in those facilities. I've only been in the college football playoff talk. I've only been in one facility ever that we were even close to it. And I remember sitting there when the thing came on Tuesday night. You're worried about your third down and red zone package. You're not worried about where the college football playoff is. You're not even watching it. You might get a text message, a notification pops up on your phone from ESPN or The Athletic or whatever you follow. A Buckeyes Now notification. It pops up on your phone. Hey, Buckeyes are this. Ryan Day and his staff were not sitting there with popcorn like, oh, what are they going to say this week? Oh, we're in the top 4, guys. Like, can you believe it? Like, they don't care. They know they have to take care of what's on the field. And I think that's where you see the college football playoff does a good job of creating these debates. And that's part of the reason they want to keep it at 4. They want to keep it. There are people that want to keep it at 4 because why? Behind closed doors, it gives you this great debate that you see. It's the same debate that we're having here in the state of Ohio. I was at a function last night. I was talking to a gentleman, and he was talking. He goes, "Can you believe that 16 teams in each region get into the playoffs in the state of Ohio now for high school football?" And here's the argument. There were 5 13 seeds that beat 4 seeds in the first round of the playoffs. So then it goes, well, wait a second. Well, maybe there's something there. So that's where you get into this, the college football playoff. Is 16 too big? Like, I don't know. Does somebody want to see Georgia play UTSA in the opener? And, because they have the automatic bid, and Brendan, and not a soft plug for Brendan, but you're going to announce the Division III playoffs this Sunday, and when those Division III teams make it, and I've been part of that. When you make the Division III playoff, it's a great thing because sometimes the number 1 seed is going to play a team that won their conference, the 6-4 automatic bid team, and they go destroy those guys in the first round. But then you have games where maybe the 7 seed is going to push the 2 seed, or maybe you're going to have these different things happen, and really, maybe cut another game off the schedule, get to 11 games, and really play this out with the 16-team playoff. And I know there's the bowl game implications, but people watch these games. They're going to be able to do this, and you have them travel to neutral sites. There's a way to do it. There's a way to obtain money. People love throwing money at college football. I'm not smart enough to put it all together, but there's a lot of thought there that you could really let these teams go play each other instead of sitting there and looming, going, "Oh, wait a second." Oklahoma's got to sit there and say, "We're the Big 12 champ. We historically have been in the playoff. I don't know how many times. Probably almost more than besides Alabama and Ohio State."
Yeah, I think it's 4.
They've been in it a lot. It's hard to look at
won a game yet, but
Oklahoma's not there, and because they're playing average this year, undefeatedly average, we're looking at them going, I don't know. We'll see what happens. That's the team I worry about when it all comes down to it. This team gets hot with these games that they're playing in the Big 12 coming up. Oklahoma's the sleeper in this college football playoff. If Oklahoma starts playing better football and they run the table, that's who, like you said, Brendan, like Oregon, that's who they got to worry about. And then if you're Oregon, you sit there and go, wait a second, we beat Ohio State. If both teams are a 1-loss team and they're sitting there, both conference champs, I know the committee's going to want to go Ohio State because fan base. Brendan, Lincoln, Nebraska, you flew out there last week. People on Thursday.
I flew out on Thursday, and there were a dozen people on my flight on Thursday morning. And I flew out Sunday night, and there were, 30 people on my flight Sunday night.
The Buckeyes could play in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and there would be the stadium would be full of scarlet and gray. That's how it is. So
yeah, no, it's one of the things that Ohio State fans love about the culture and the environment around the program. But just to kind of put a bow on that, look, man, I just thought it was insane, and I'm sure Gary Bart is a nice guy. He's the athletic director at Iowa, and he's the chair of the committee for the college football playoff. He essentially comes on camera and says, we give credence to Michigan State for beating Michigan, but Michigan's the better team. It's kind of like, well, how do you justify that? Because they weren't the better team, literally on the field for 60 minutes. Like they actually proved to us they weren't. So I don't know. That's the whole point of playing the games.
Herm Edwards. What did Herm Edwards say? What did our guy Herm say?
You play to win the game.
You play to win the game. That's what people do. That's why we play these games. Come on, guys. Let's be smart about it.
All right. I'm not going to let you get off then without giving us your Keith Jackson, because you Keith Jackson to me before we got on air. And if you could do a good Herm Edwards, we saw last week that your Eddie Orgeron was right on cue, but your Keith Jackson took me by surprise. I didn't expect that out of you.
Oh, Nelly, Brendan, we're here on the banks of the old Olentangy, where the Buckeyes call home, where the Boilermakers look to play spoiler in one of the grandioso schemes. The old horseshoe, here live on ABC, 3:30.
If you close your eyes or look away from the screen, I'm telling you, that's a pretty darn good Keith Jackson. He's
our fans probably don't know
football, man. He always will be. You caught me off guard with that one early. That was pretty good. All right, prediction for this week. What do you got?
I got Buckeyes 45, Purdue 20. I think that the offense is going to come back. I don't think Noah Ruggles is going to have the game of his life. One of the things that's on the opposite end of the sideline that we did not talk about, Purdue's kicker had a really nice game against Michigan State that kind of extended those drives for them. I think the red zone offense is going to be better just because of the ability to run the football in the low red, and they're going to grow and they're going to go. So that's right. I see it. 41-20. That's a great one. I love it right there. I'm going to give us a little bit more. I'm going to say 45-20. For the Buckeyes, and I don't know if it's going to feel that close.
I will have our predictions posted on the website here. We usually pick a good number of the big games around the country each week, and I'll post those here within the next couple of hours, but my Ohio State Purdue score is 42-22. I think it's going to be the kind of game that Ohio State is not really ever out of control of, but I don't know. There's something to me about a 21-point spread that just feels rich. It's a big spread, and David Bell is one blink of an eye away from ripping off some big crazy play.
And Aiden O'Connell's a blink away from throwing another interception.
He sure is. He sure is. I mean, you think about the crazy trick play that you've probably seen all week that they ran last week. Like, I'm sure Purdue's going to have something goofy tucked up their sleeve. Does it hit? I don't know. But I think it's going to be a weird score this week. So I think Ohio State wins comfortably, but I'm going to guess that they don't cover. So I go 42-22. That's kind of where I'm at. And this is how I'm feeling right now. Yakov, you're my man. Keith lives. He does. He lives through you, Tommy. He lives through you.
I played a lot of, College Game Breaker, I think, back on the video game. So you would sit there in your bedroom as a kid and you'd play it and then have the narration of Keith Jackson. So it just kind of resonated in the head. And it's just whenever I'm down and out, oh, Nelly, Holy Spirit, help me. I need you.
Oh, I love it. All right, our preview and prediction this week: Ohio State comfortably beats Purdue, which sets up potentially a huge game with Michigan State. Is that game quite as big as we thought it would be based on the fact that Michigan State has now lost a game? I guess we'll find out next week, but the Buckeyes have to get past the Boilermakers, who everybody seems to want to call the Spoilermakers this year because of their 2 wins over Iowa and Michigan State. But I don't think they're going to be spoiling anybody this week. I don't think they're sneaking up on the Buckeyes whatsoever. So looking forward to a fun game. We've got a boatload of coverage for you planned on Buckeyes Now. We hope you'll make this your game day home. We'll have an instant analysis live post-game show after the game is over, after the press conferences wrap up. Then Sunday morning, we'll have a chance to chat a little bit about our thoughts after Ohio State and Purdue wrap things up on Saturday afternoon. 3:30 on ABC down at the Horseshoe. Hope you can be there. If not, Buckeyes Now has you covered. For Tommy Zagorski, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you soon. Ohio State, Purdue coming up. Hard to believe it's already getting into a point now where it's the middle of November. Football is a lot of fun. Hope you'll make Buckeyes Now your home for all things Ohio State. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Good morning.